right, we're going to keep watching. Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. This is where right and left can come to be reasonable. Speaker Johnson is on the floor. There is a small margin for him. He can't lose more than, I guess, 2 of his membership, but that assumes all Democrats vote against the continuing resolution. And I don't know that that's going to happen. I'll tell you something. I'm not impressed by the history of this being the longest government shutdown. It's a regrettable history. I think this is an historic moment for another reason. I think the Democratic Party, as we know it, is about to end. I think that this is the birth of the new left. I think the reason that you see so many high-profile Democrats, especially in the House, accusing the Democratic senators for ending the shutdown of basically being traitors. Did you hear AOC? She was literally accusing them of like a conspiracy. And she said, in exchange for nothing. It's really interesting to me. It makes so little sense on the merits that I have to believe it's a ploy. Why? Well, look, forget about the tricky bit of arguing we should have kept going with this when there are thousands of federal workers and their families not being paid, millions of people in need not getting full SNAP benefits, all the stuff going on with the flights. That's not an easy thing to want more of. So was there some deal on the table that we don't know about? Was something getting close that they know that we don't? Because if that's not the case, and we're about to talk to somebody who absolutely knows if it were the case, certainly better than AOC or Jeffries would, because he's one of the Senate Democrats who was part of this process. If that's not what they know, then what this really is a line in the sand for them, that we're not with them anymore. And that's why the vote will be somewhat telling also. We've never seen this happen before. Never. Okay? Not in the modern era. Okay? So capitulation on policy from the majority party in power when the government gets shut down, obviously by the minority, has never happened. I get why you would want to believe that something could happen, but with the absence of any proof, it only leaves you with one possibility, which is they want to divide the party. They want maybe to blow up the party, get new leaders in a new direction. I believe this could be the moment that the populist movement, that is a reaction to MAGA, which I've been calling mega. It's not the same, but it's fueled in reaction to MAGA and by the Democratic Socialists of America and with their new allies who are playing with some fundamentalist culture plays, are getting ready to take over. So what we need is a source who knows the reality of what would have happened if the shutdown continued. And that is Pennsylvania Senator, Democrat John Fetterman. Big man, thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, it's always, thanks. Always great to be here.
First of all, Unfettered, Clever, his new memoir, although he's got a lot of life left to live and a lot of service, just released. So congratulations on the book. You're going to have a bunch of new chapters. I think we may be living one. What is the reality of whether or not, if you had kept this going, that there was a deal to be had to get the ACA subsidies, to get some kind of cost reduction for health care done?
Well, I do think, I would just try to remind people that, if people think it's a good thing to shut our government down again, and it's always a bad idea, but we can revisit that in January. And now we have today until we have that vote next month. And now we can devise a plan. We can work together to extend those tax credits in some form. It's unlikely it'll be exactly what the Democrats, my party, we set up, and we are the party that designed them to expire at the end of this year. That wasn't the Republican plan. That was a Democratic plan, the way they designed that when we were in the majority. And now we're in the minority. That's democracy. Now we have to negotiate to find a way forward. And I do believe that is possible. I do. What President Trump decides on that, I have no idea. I have no insight on that. But I do believe John Thune is an honorable guy. We will have a vote, and we have over a month to make our argument to the nation and to convince America that this is the right thing to do for red and blue America, not just the Democrats. And then I think that's the essence of democracy. And that's why we betrayed our party's core values as a committed Democrat to put 42 million Americans that depend on SNAP to feed themselves in the middle of that, and not pay our military, not pay the police that protect all of us there on the Capitol, and all of those unions that are touched by this shutdown. Those are the people that we fight for. That's to me, that's some of the most people dearest to me. So that's why it's wrong. And now that we broke the record to have the longest shutdown. I mean, that's not a record that you should celebrate. I mean, that's an ongoing tragedy, honestly, for the nation to even where we're at.
So, Senator, what do you make of AOC's suggestion, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, that you and the other 7 Democrats basically conspired against the interests of America and your party and caved when there was a deal to be had if you had just kept the government shut down? Is there any reason for anyone to believe that there was a deal to be had if you kept the government shut down?
Well, I don't really spend much time concerned with what her views on things are.
Was there a deal that we don't know about, Senator? Was there a deal? Like, was there something on the table that we don't know about?
Well, what I'm saying, it's like, we can have a conversation when our government is open and we're feeding everybody, we're paying everybody. We are not making flying in America less safe. I mean, these are serious things. There are serious kinds of consequences to shut our government down. Parties have different priorities, and our joint priority should be to keep our government open and functioning, and that we can figure out these other kinds of priorities and the mix of them. That's the essence of democracy for that. And, people attacking fellow Dems, like, really? I mean, that's just not helpful. Honestly, I represent Pennsylvania. I don't represent just a district, in New York of very, very left folks, like AOC. I keep people, Pennsylvania keeps people honest here. And now you remember that there are both sides. And Pennsylvania is the kind of state that you have to win if you really want to win the presidency, and if you really, want to prevail and be a part of the majority to make the kinds of rules the next time for that. So that's the argument that I consistently make. And I understand that parts of the Democratic Party are upset to do this, but I put my country ahead of my party. And I know I'm going to take the flak for it, because I think that's what leadership is, the essence, is doing what's right for the country, even if that moves against your own political interests.
What do you make of the argument that this was your only leverage, and without this, you're at the mercy of the Republicans and they don't want to cut costs?
It's like I refuse to use American, citizens that, food insecure, not pay our military. They are not my leverage. Those are my fellow citizens. Those are the ones that I defend. Those are the ones that I fight for. Some of them are the most vulnerable ones. I refuse to put them in the middle. And just like I said, it's just like, again, it's a fundamental betrayal of, what I think is our core party's values.
I don't know if you got to hear the top, because you look like, you're in like a safe room somewhere. But at the top, I was saying, they're so confident that you guys were traitors and that there was a deal to be had, even though there are no facts that suggest that it makes me think this is about something else, not just posturing to the American people that you want to fight for their cause, which I get. But do you believe that this may be, at least in part, about your party changing, and the populist movement in reaction to MAGA and the Democratic Socialists, that this may be a moment where they want to take over the Democratic Party?
I promise you, America's future and my party's future is not socialism or kinds of outlandish far left kinds of ideas. And it's been a year ago, after we lost the election, a lot of those parts and part of those ideas pushed our party over the cliff. And that's why we're in this situation right now. That's why we're firmly in the minority. And that's why we've lost control of the White House. So some people, if you think that's a solution, that's fine, but it's going to be a competition of ideas, and we know that's not going to prevail. What's going to prevail is common sense. What's going to prevail, choosing this country over, part of the extreme in our party. What's going to prevail is common sense, and I do believe, for me, in the kinds of chaos that we have in this Trump administration, we should respond with order and logic and patriotism, and not shutting down our government right now. And that's where I'm at. And I don't know why that's controversial. That's not a big tent party. If you're not allowed to have the opinion that it's wrong to shut our government down and put these people in the middle of it and now referred to as you're a traitor, or, saying all these other kinds of labels.
Senator Fetterman, I appreciate your candor. Congratulations on the book. I just think it's a little early because Unfettered is going to wind up having a lot more chapters added to it if things go the way I see them going with your future in service and beyond. Thank you for being a fair broker. Thank you for what's going on. And I appreciate you. You always have an invitation here.
Thank you for having me on, and welcome me back anytime. Thank you.
All right, Senator Fetterman, be well. 4 minutes and 35 seconds. Coming up, I want to bring in Stephen A. and Bill O'Reilly about whether they see this the way I do or not. I thought that was really interesting. Fetterman is a measured guy, right? Despite the size and the unorthodox nature that he presents himself, with the hoodie. For him to say, yeah, socialism isn't us. If they want to bring it, let them bring it. That's a pretty bold move. What do they think? Next. It's interesting. If this is about what I think it is, which is the Democratic Party having a reckoning with itself, there are 3 Democrats that have voted for the CR in the House. Now, what does that tell you? Well, look, I think it's hard not to vote for the CR. I'll be honest. But it also says that this grip of the populist movement, the democratic socialist movement and the more fringe culture elements that have attached to it, because remember, it always takes both. It takes an economic part and a social part for a populist movement. On MAGA, you had policies for the working man and woman with what? Nativism. White nationalism, all those anger-driven culture components to keep the outrage going. You're going to need the same thing on the left. But for them to have 3 Democrats vote for this shows not everybody is convinced. And you heard Senator John Fetterman say here he doesn't care what AOC says about him and the other senators being traitors, that she's just for one lefty district. He's got a whole state he's got to think about, and that his party will never be about socialism. Strong words, given what's going on in his party. Let's get perspective. Stephen A. Smith and the best-selling author of Confronting Evil, Bill O'Reilly. Good to have you both. Did you get to hear the senator, guys? Were you able to hear the interview of both of you? All right. So, Stephen A., what'd you make of it? Good. Let me get Stephen. I'm coming right to you, Bill. Go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I completely agree with the senator. I think he's absolutely right in the position that he took. I don't think, if you want to talk about socialism, bring it on. I don't think that that's the future of the Democratic Party if they want to have any cachet. I definitely think the Mamdanis of the world are relative one-offs. I definitely applaud his position, maybe not his verbiage, but in terms of dismissing what AOC said because of the rhetoric that she was throwing in his direction, because he sided with the GOP on this matter. I think it was apropos for him to remind her and the country that she has a district to think about. He has an entire state to think about as a senator from the state of Pennsylvania. And when you're talking about a 43-day shutdown that involved federal workers being furloughed, missing checks, not getting paid, 42 million folks on snaps, that being jeopardized and what have you. When you're talking about all of those kind of things, it's a far more wide-ranging issue. And these Democrats that were holding out, talking about leverage and talking about this was something that could be perceived as the Trump Trump shutdown, the Trump shutdown. It was clearly a strategy that they were employing on their part because they thought it was going to buy them some leverage. They're looking at Virginia. They're looking at New Jersey. They're looking at what happened in New York City. Even though that was relatively predictable in terms of Dems winning those places, they were acting as if that was some sort of referendum against the GOP, and it would be indicative of things to come down the pike if they would continue to hold down the fort and highlight what Trump was doing wrong, per se. And Fetterman was thinking about his people and how they're suffering, and that took priority over party, and I think he made the right decision.
Yeah, it's kind of ballsy, though, to be honest, given the state of play within the party, Bill. So, by the way, for everybody watching right now and listening, they now have enough votes. The CR will carry. And just to remind you what that means, it just takes us to January. Senator Fetterman made that point also, Bill, that they can revisit this again in like a month and change. But what do you make of my suggestion that this isn't just about blaming the senators for caving? This is about changing their party.
Well, I don't think anybody cares about that. I mean, maybe the party.
Well, I do, so answer my question.
Well, I can't because there's just no emotion or analysis attached to it. So the Democratic Party right now is fractured. Okay, so I don't even know what they got. What did they get holding up the government for 43 days? What? Did they get anything, Cuomo?
Well, that's their beef. Is they're saying you should have kept it shut down, and we would have gotten what we wanted, which was to fix health care for people.
Coulda. Let's deal with history. What did the Democratic Party get for shutting the government down for 43 days? What?
Nothing, but that's their complaint, Bill. They're saying the senators shouldn't have acquiesced. That's why they're saying they caved.
I don't care about the complaints. So on the record, I don't care about the complaint. Who cares what they say? On the record is we, the Democratic Party, shut down the United States government for 43 days and got bupkis. That's pretty embarrassing, I think, right? Isn't that embarrassing?
Well, let me.
Can I answer?
Stephen A. Please.
Yes, Bill. It's embarrassing if you're looking at it from the macro, if you're somebody that's just paying attention to the final result. The Democrats, however, who voted to hold the line, their position is clearly if we had held out, ultimately this would have been perceived as a Trump shutdown. There would have been some caving on the part of some of the GOP members because they represent states where they were going to be affected by the shutdown as well, and they would have been made to pay a price. Had that happened, then they would be making a different argument. They can't make the argument because some of their own decided to go with the GOP, which you know, Bill, and that's what it is.
Look. Stephen A., I'll put this in sports terms to make you feel at home. If the Kansas City Royals, all right, scored 8 runs every game, they would have won a pennant, all right, in the World Series. But we're dealing with reality, some of us, and the reality is that the Democratic Party held up the government for 43 days, causing pain to individual Americans, and got nothing. I believe that's a resounding defeat.
Bill,
isn't it?
I got you. You're being too micro, okay? Because here's what they got, which matters, and it matters to the American people, and should matter to this administration. They are talking about health care all over this country right now. They're talking about costs, and they're talking about what's going to be done. And it is now very clear that what the big, beautiful bill was about was extending those tax cuts and paying for it by cutting health care for a lot of people in ways that they really need. And that is important because it could decide the midterms. So,
not clear to me,
that
Cuomo.
matters. Look, let me put it in terms you can understand. Bill, I'll make it clear to you, and I'll slow down and I'll use smaller words, okay? Health care costs are crippling people who are in MAGA and everywhere in the rational world. The administration has no plan and no desire to even talk about it. That's bad. The Democrats are using that as the linchpin to an affordability movement that could absolutely sweep the country the way MAGA did. That would be good
Okay.
for the
I got it.
Democrats
Well,
if they can get
I-
everyone on board.
Not too much. I can only absorb a little at a time. Okay?
I got it. I got it.
So number one, I believe the posture from day one of shutdown was that the Republicans wanted to talk to the Democrats about this very issue, that they were willing to debate it, willing to discuss it, so
Right, but
that
that's a
they
lie.
can come to
because
a conclusion.
they wouldn't hold
Oh,
votes.
that's a
They
lie.
wouldn't hold debate.
Oh.
Yeah, Johnson wouldn't allow debate. He wouldn't put him in session. He wouldn't put a deal on the table. He wouldn't talk to him about it. Yeah.
Until the government opened. That was the carrot and the stick.
Before the shutdown.
No.
They wouldn't do
They
it. That's
would have
why they shut
said-
it down.
They would, from the very beginning, from Trump on down, open the government, we'll have the discussion, which is needed.
But
Okay,
they
that's number
wouldn't
one.
have the discussion before. If you won't talk to me about it before, so I then shut down the government, and you say, open it back up, I'll
No.
talk to you, I know you're lying because you wouldn't talk to me before. That's why they did it.
No, that makes absolutely no sense. If you're going to have a guy like
To you.
Trump and Thune and Johnson say, we'll have a conversation after you open it up, so I'm believing, you don't have to believe him, I don't care. And the second thing is, you keep saying that, the big bill, they throw the people off. They didn't throw anybody off. It was Medicaid, and if you want it, you got to look for a job or volunteer. There are lots of medical exceptions in it. They didn't throw anybody off. Nobody's losing anything.
No, that's not even close
What
to
has to
accurate.
happen.
It's not even
Of course
close
it
to
is.
accurate, Bill. It's
All right.
not. It's not even
Yes, it
close,
is.
even for you.
Yes,
Bill, the work
it is.
requirements for Medicaid has one of the lowest indexes of any government program of people who don't work because they don't want to. The numbers are from the
that doesn't matter.
GAO.
That's
Of
what's
course it
in,
does.
in
You
the
just
bill.
said
You gotta
that
look.
all they wanted to do was put in work requirements because you want people to believe that if you need government help for health care or food, you're lazy. And that is a trope that the conservatives and MAGA
this is
uses. But it is inaccurate, Bill. They're just needing help. They're not lazy. Those who can work, work.
I'm trying to just report what's in the bill, but it's
Yes.
hopeless with you tonight. Hopeless.
Oh, come on.
Okay, the one other point I want to make, and then I want to hear what Stephen A. has to say about this.
Yes.
So when you have a situation where there is one goal by the Democratic Party, and this is clearly stated, that we want to keep the COVID level of spending for Obamacare, when the law says it expires and you go back to the pre-COVID level. That's what this was all about. And the Democrats said, blank the law. We want the COVID level. And if you don't give it to us, blank you, we're shutting the government down. You like that, Cuomo? You think that's good? All right. Stephen A.
I don't like it. I don't like it. I think it was the right fight, the right issue, but the wrong tactic. Stephen A. to you. Thank you for your patience.
I do not like it at all. And I do believe it was the wrong tactic. Bill O'Reilly is absolutely right with what he was saying about the last part. Here's my problem with what you're saying, Bill. I would challenge you, Bill O'Reilly, that if this were the other side of the aisle, Mr. Independent, you would have at least acknowledged it was a formidable strategy to employ. Because you would have said, hey, okay, we got an election coming up. Yes, the mayoral seat in New York City. Yes, the gubernatorial seats in Jersey and Virginia. They're going to couch that as, look at this, the election is approaching. So they took this position during the shutdown, okay? Okay, I believe, and I
Why
said
would
this
I
for the
do
record.
that?
No, let me say, I'm saying, at that
Why
particular
would
moment.
I do that?
Why would you do what, Bill? I'm sorry.
Why would I do
would
it? The only point that Cuomo made that was valid in his little diatribe, okay, was that the Republicans don't have anything. They don't have anything. So if you are a diehard Republican, a MAGA person, you got the hat, you got the shirt, all right, you're walking around, your entire weakness is there's no alternative. The Republicans don't put forth anything.
That's fair.
So
but what I'm...
The Democrats have a legitimate argument and beef that the other side doesn't have anything. So why, Stephen A., would I stick up for people who don't have anything?
No, what I'm saying to you, I'm saying to you, it's not a matter of sticking up for them. I'm saying if you see a side and you believe that that strategy that they're trying to employ is the only viable strategy available to them as it pertains to what they're looking for, what they're seeking, which means blemishing the present administration, making sure he gets credit for the shutdown instead of them, thinking that it could be parlayed into you possibly positioning yourself to better win the 2026 election by blemishing him and stating it to somebody. I'm saying to you, I
don't care about any of that.
I didn't say you care, Bill. What I said is that you'd acknowledge that it's a strategy that might have been worth them exploring for a particular moment in time. That's all I'm saying.
No, it's not worth it. People got hurt. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
People got hurt, and they knew people were going to get hurt. Political strategy.
Well, we're not going to sit up here.
When political strategy hurts human beings, then you get another strategy.
Wait. Stop right there. You don't get away with that with me, Bill O'Reilly. Here's the thing. I've been watching you for decades, my man. I am a fan. I watched the No Spin Zone. I've watched the O'Reilly Factor. I've watched you everywhere for the better part of the last 25 years. Don't bring that to me. The fact is, there have been plenty of times where there are things that have hurt the American people. But from a political perspective, if you see it as something that strategically could position somebody to be in a better position than they were before employing that strategy, you'd at least acknowledge, hey, they tried, it didn't work, but that's how it goes because it's the world of politics. I've seen you say that on many occasions.
I would say,
yes, you have.
As an American patriot, as you both are, I believe that I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't say that. I would say if your strategy is to win a political battle, but you're hurting millions of Americans in the process, get a new strategy.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think shutdown should be illegal. Republicans have presided over more of them in the modern era than Democrats. It's what a minority party does when it's desperate and wants to play to anger and outrage, and it has never yielded a policy change. Never yielded a policy change, and the Democrats knew it going into
and
it.
They thought it was going to.
What do they get getting out of it? I'll give you a big signal of how they feel about this, okay? No other show on TV right now in this slot has avoided the latest turn in the Epstein files as long as I have. Because one, I see that it's such an obvious head fake. The shutdown is losing its momentum and its outrage. We need a new point of outrage. Here comes these emails that we all knew were coming about Epstein. Do the emails change the understanding of this story? Because the Democrats definitely think they do. They think the president is about to take a very dark turn. What do Bill and Stephen think? I'll give you a little bit of a hint. I don't believe that. Stay with us.
It is not a coincidence that the Democrats leaked these emails to the fake news this morning ahead of Republicans reopening the government. This is another distraction campaign by the Democrat in the liberal media, and it's why I'm being asked questions about Epstein instead of the government reopening because of Republicans and President Trump.
I gotta say, Leavitt is good at her job, even if it is laughable how little high ground she has. Because let me tell you something. When the right thought that the Epstein files were going to sink Democrats, it's all they talked about. That's why the head of the FBI and his number two made their name selling bullshizzle on podcast after podcast about what was in them because they thought it was going to sink the left. Now, these emails did come out at a very opportune time, just as the outrage over the shutdown is fading, right? So, what are they? They are emails we knew existed. Now, are they blockbuster the way it's all over your social media? I don't think so. It is not surprising to me to hear that President Trump may have spent a lot of time around Epstein when there were girls around. I don't think that's a surprise. It is not a surprise that that Epstein may have suggested that Trump knows things and hasn't talked yet. Now, is that true? I don't know. But there's the most interesting thing to me that you won't care about as I bring in Stephen A. and Bill is this guy, Michael Wolff. You know, journalists make choices. It is not easy giving advice to a dirtbag. And this guy, Michael Wolff, is a controversial guy, can be a solid reporter from time to time. He was like coaching Jeffrey Epstein about like how to handle this mess, which is kind of creepy. He's going to have to explain it. Now, here are the emails. One is from 2011 to Ghislaine Maxwell. Epstein writes, I want you to realize that that dog hasn't barked is Trump, meaning he'll talk. The victim spent hours at my house with him. He's never once been mentioned. Ghislaine responded, I've been thinking about that. The White House said the unnamed victim was Virginia Giuffre. Virginia committed suicide earlier this year, but it said repeatedly that Trump was not involved in anything against her. And I will remind you, Ghislaine Maxwell has had a lot of opportunities to throw Trump under the bus, and it hasn't happened. The other one is this one from to author Michael Wolff. Epstein wrote, Trump said he asked me to resign, never remember ever. He's talking about Mar-a-Lago. Of course he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. Now, I don't know what that's about. The president said the Democrats are trying to bring up the Jeffrey Epstein hoax again because they'll do anything at all to deflect on how badly they've done on the shutdown and so many other subjects. A very bad or stupid Republican would fall into that trap. Fair point. I do believe the Democrats put it out right now for that reason. But what about the substance of it? And is this another indication, fellas? They got to release everything that they have. Otherwise, this drip, drip, drip will just be going. Bill O'Reilly, what is your take on the significance?
So on St. Patrick's Day of this year, I was in the Oval Office with President Trump, and he asked me, what about the Epstein files? Should they be released? And I said, Mr. President, if there is verification of facts in the Epstein case from the attorney generals, Barr and Garland, you got to release it. But you can't release anything unverified that the Justice Department has not confirmed to be true. That's not fair because innocent people, and Epstein knew thousands of people in New York, could be attached to this Epstein. I was going to hurt them and their family. So that was my answer, direct answer to the president's question. Now, what we see today is a bunch of innuendo. It's hearsay. There isn't any direct backup for any allegation because there aren't any allegations other than Trump may have been in a house where there are some girls. Right. Okay. So you have the lady in question, and I feel very bad for Miss Giuffre's family. He committed suicide. What a horrible thing. The whole thing is just awful. And that's right on Epstein. You have her saying under oath, Trump didn't do anything, and you have Maxwell. But here's the most important person you have, not under oath. Dershowitz. Dershowitz was Epstein's lawyer, and lawyer-client confidentiality ends with death. Dershowitz went on television today, said, I have all of the Epstein stuff, and there isn't anything. And I asked Epstein directly, while I was representing him, whether Donald Trump was involved in any kind of untoward activity. And Epstein said no. So now you have the three principal players in this case, all saying the same thing. Yet the press is so irresponsible, so corrupt, so hateful, they will not even mention that. It's death by innuendo. That is what they are aiming for.
Stephen A., what you think?
I get that. And I think that what Bill said and just articulated is incredibly important. It is death by innuendo, according to the evidence that has already been put out there and what Bill articulated in terms of what Alan Dershowitz had to say, what Ms. Maxwell has had to say. Even Epstein, in the emails where he said the dog that's barked is Trump, he's indicating that he would talk. Well, why would Trump talk if he's the one that's being, why would he talk if he's the one that's being implicated? If anything, he would talk to talk. Epstein came across as being fearful that Trump might talk about him, not about Trump. And so all of those things make sense. Here's the only thing that I would add to Bill in terms of this death by innuendo. Yeah, that's from the politicians. That's from them wanting to open the Epstein files. Got it. But there's an abundance of people out there, particularly those associated with the MAGA movement, that want it released as well. And they're not politicians. They're American citizens who have been very emphatic and adamant in their support of Trump, by and large, from a policy perspective, from his politics. But when it comes to this issue, they're not bending on that. Why? Because they're saying even if it's not him, it's power brokers that exist inside and outside our government that he's familiar with, and they don't want those folks protected. So to sit up here and act as if it's just a political thing and politicians that want to kill him by innuendo and stuff like that, that's not to say you're wrong, Bill, because it's certainly, they don't mind slicing the dice and kill Donald Trump up any chance they get. Fair enough. But that doesn't have anything to do with the average citizen out there that wants to find out about those individuals that he makes known.
It doesn't matter what side, of the political aisle you're on. If you are asking for unverified information about a heinous crime and criminal to be given to the public, unverified now. Remember, the Justice Department under 2 administrations had this information, not verified it. If that's what you want, then you need to read my book, Killing the Witches, because that's the kind of country
that's not what they want.
We'll have. We'll burn them at the stake. We don't care.
Bill, that's not what they're saying.
We don't
That's
care.
not what they're saying, Bill. That's not what they're saying. See, that's you, and I get it. What they're saying, Bill, is they don't believe it's unverified. They don't believe that after all of this time, there's any way in hell that it's not verified. See, that's the problem. See, right there, that's body language there. You got to stop that, Bill. You got to stop that. You cannot sit up here and have people who are supporters of yours, who are American citizens, they're pointing to young ladies who were sexually molested, and they believe that there are people who are criminals that are power brokers, and they want to find out who they are, and you want to go like this.
That's the piece.
No.
That's the piece. I got to take a break.
They don't have the capacity. Wait. Ho.
All right,
They don't have the capacity, Stephen A., to find out. They don't have the capacity to find out. That's what the Justice Department's there for. It's what the FBI is there for.
But Bill,
it's what the court system is there for. Wait, no. Stephen A. says they want to find out. Okay. But there is no mechanism for the people to go in and investigate. So you've got to depend on what has been compiled by the authorities. So the people, whether they're MAGA, whether they're wrong. You don't launch witch hunts.
All right, I'm with you. I got to take a break. We're going to come back and button this up. But just for the context, okay? It's not a witch hunt, okay? This is a bad guy. He is a witch, okay? And Epstein. And so was Maxwell. And they're both going to go to the same circle of hell, in my opinion. But with this many young girls victimized, when you put in a FOIA request, you just don't get verified information, okay? They should release the files. If people just knew Epstein, they'll explain it away. It'll be fine. You need disclosure.
Won't be fine.
Let's get our final thoughts on this right after this. Look, it may not, but it's not fine like this either. We'll be back right after this. Final thoughts. Bill O'Reilly, you first.
I don't believe 2 separate attorneys general, Barr and Garland, would cover up for rich white guys in a heinous crime like this. I just don't believe it. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm naive. And then you throw in Dershowitz, who was on the scene. I think the evidence is overwhelming that the Justice Department has information, but most of it's unverified, and that should not be put out. You know, this program tonight was almost as fun as me going on Mar over the weekend. I think he's still recovering from that. But anyway, It's a simple thing for me. I follow the evidence.
Well, it's not
Stephen A.
as simple for
Smith.
everybody else. It's not as simple for everybody else, Bill. And respectfully, that's part of your problem. And I love you, but that's part of your problem. The fact is that you may be absolutely right with what you're saying, and I'm going to vibe with you on this. I tend to side with you in terms of what you're saying, but I respect the fact that there are millions of American citizens who may think otherwise and don't flow with Bill O'Reilly's mode of thinking, and they need to be respected as well. They are American citizens. They are voters. They are people who have supported Donald Trump. They are people who have supported a lot of his policies, et cetera, et cetera. They're supporting his DOJ. They're supporting a lot of things. And they have been turned off by the process. They are not believing some of the things that they have heard. They don't believe this administration or the people that work under them have been as forthcoming as they should have been. And they believe there are some guilty culprits who may very well not be Donald Trump, but he may know about. And some of them believe that he might be compelled to be protective of people that he considers his friends or anything like that. The fact that they feel that way is not evidence. You're absolutely right. But it doesn't mean that their feelings should be ignored or swept under the rug or summarily dismissed because somebody who happens to be an iconic figure in television spanning decades shrugs his shoulders and say, that's the way it should be. That ain't how the world works. It works, especially in the modern era. They think otherwise, and they have to be respected too.
Gentlemen, I got to jump. Stephen A. Smith, thank you. Bill O'Reilly, thank you. My thought is easy. Release the files. We'll be right back. I'm an attorney for 100 years. I'm an investigative journalist for over a quarter century. Release the files. Yes, it may get messy. Yes, there may be litigation. There's been too much of it made. Transparency is trust. It has to be done. Release the files on Epstein. Leland Vittert starts right now.
How do we trust you with that stash, though?
You don't. I mean, This is one of the lowest situations I've ever had in my life. I've done a lot of embarrassing things, never anything more profoundly so than this, whatever it is on my face.
Yeah, my father once gave me a great piece of advice. Yeah, he said, don't ever bet more than you can afford to lose. And I feel like you did that.
I feel like this will never go away.
Okay.
This will never, I'll never live it down,
Yeah,
Leland. I'll never live it down.
Tapes live forever. Good to see you. Chris, great show.